Let's talk about Castlevanias. Everyone talks about Metroidvanias, but they really like to lean on the Metroid side, don't they? Or neither side of the equation, just kinda doing their own thing. But where, pray tell, are the castles? And don't say Ireland, I searched every castle there and only found a couple of Gankanogs. And I knocked several candles over and none of them had hearts. Unrelated, but I'm not allowed in Ireland anymore. There are a few Castlevania-likes in the indie space, like Time Spinner or Ega Zone Bloodstained, and don't get me wrong, I'm super excited about that sequel announcement, but it's not in my hands right now, and I have no object permanence. What was I talking about? Chronicles of the Wolf is a game with an interesting pedigree, as its developer Megami Games once made the well-liked Castlevania game The Lacard Chronicles, and as we've seen with the Sonic fan game community or Toby Fox's Earthbound ROM hack, many legitimate developers cut their teeth in the fan circuit before making a name for themselves with their original work. Of course, sometimes that's just Sonic with the name changed, and so, well, yeah, that's the deal with Chronicles of the Wolf. But as you'll soon see, I'm perfectly fine with that, and actually, that's why I'm so excited to talk about it. You play as Matteo Lombardo, a member in training of the Rose-Crossed Knights who is sent to dispatch the mighty beast Gevadon, a wolf who has been killing and tormenting the countryside. Of course, as soon as you get there, everything goes pear-shaped with the rest of your crew slaughtered, so it'll be up to you alone to save the day, gaining allies, slaying foul fiends, and destroying any light source you can find. Let me make this clear, there is absolutely no intent on the part of Chronicles of the Wolf to be anything other than a new Castlevania game. It is straight up a modern take on Simon's Quest, but with the aesthetic of Rondo of Blood. This extends to what will probably be its most divisive element, which is its controls. Even after you remap them, they're going to feel stiff as hell. Part of me thinks this is due to the game being made in ClickTeam Fusion, one of the older plug-and-play game engines out there. Going into menus, there's an awkward white cut every time. You can really feel the creaking and the straining of this code. But here's the thing. And here's the thing about the controls. I actually don't mind them. They're a little clunky, sure, but in a retro way that makes them feel more accurate to the era. I mean, Castlevania was the series where you had to commit to every jump, and any enemy contact would stun lock you. So this is still a mile ahead of the NES trilogy. But if you're not a fan of it in the early going, it might never click for you, keep that in mind. So I call the game a take on Simon's Quest because in addition to the influence it takes from the handheld Castlevania games, you also get tips on where to progress by talking to NPCs. There are a couple of different towns in the game, each with a couple of side quests and a couple of secrets, like this one tavern chef who turns out to have been a secret member of the cult, and another town has a rumor of a vampire, and there's this one guy who's only awake at night and he invites you to get closer. So does a vampire have to invite a human into their— oh no! Yeah, so there are scripted deaths in this game, and I'm kind of a sicko for it. You're definitely given advance warning ahead of time for most of them, with a couple of exceptions that just expect you to be paying attention to context clues. That might rub people the wrong way, as the game utilizes the same manual save system as the Igavanias, so you could lose some time to a silly death, Sierra style. Again, if that sort of thing sounds like it would frustrate you, maybe watch a playthrough instead. Otherwise, this is as close to a new Castlevania as we're ever going to get. It's got sub-weapons that consume mana, it has tons of gear to find and equip, plenty of strange enemies and bosses to fight, and a game structure similar to Order of Ecclesia, where you travel across the lands until you unlock the giant castle that makes up the second half of the game. Weirdly, the only thing that's missing is an actual whip, and maybe that was just an act of the developer to cover their own ass. But I'd say you won't really miss it, as there's plenty of other weapons, from axes to broadswords to long-distance rifles. You get the satisfying on-screen level-ups, and enemies die in a bunch of little explosions, which really gives the game an authentic console feel, jankiness aside. If you like secret walls, there's plenty of them to find in this game, sometimes leading to entirely new areas. But if you're not so good at finding them, there is an accessory you can find in the world that makes secret walls flash. I really like the visuals of the game as they look unmistakably accurate to the original series while still clearly being handmade from the ground up. The biomes have that mix of vibrancy and grittiness that create a slightly supernatural feeling on top of the European fantasy setting. And the music kicks ass. Again, you get shades of Vampire Killer and Wicked Child, but without being outright copies. They utilize more Spanish instrumentation and influence, which gives it its own unique appeal. Multiple characters are voice acted, and yeah, it's cheesy, but that perfect kind of cheesy that matches the kind of acting from Symphony of the Night.
I bet that you will die.
What?
They even got narration by Robert Belgrade, the voice of Alucard himself.
After many days of travel, they arrived in the region of Chevaldour. They marched deep into the forest as the darkness fell upon them.
So what's the catch, right? Well, I've got a couple of caveats, and they aren't even necessarily about the jank. I think the biggest problem with the game involves that Simon's Quest style progression, because sometimes it's just a little unclear what you're supposed to do next. And it's not that the people are unhelpful or outright lying like in the original Simon's Quest translation, it's just that sometimes there's only one NPC in the entire world that might tip you off as to what to do, and it can be tedious to check every location to make sure you haven't missed anyone. There are multiple endings in the game, and one of the first endings involves defeating the wolf without taking down every member of the cult. But there's no real notification for when you defeat them all, and one of them is pretty far off inside of a sub-dungeon in the mountains, so I was kinda ambling around for a while, not sure if I did everything I was supposed to do. And it doesn't help that the map is fairly undetailed. Aside from marking save points and teleports, there's not really a lot of info to be gleaned if you're trying to figure out places you haven't checked. You sometimes find maps that fill out a portion of a region on the map, and that's fine, but especially by the time you get to the castle, it would have been nice to know where the vendors were without having to go back and check in person. Like, there's not holding your hand and grabbing your hand as it clings to the cliffside and chucking it away. But none of that really dampens the fun that I had, because Chronicles of the Wolf is about as good of a Castlevania-like as I'm going to get if it's not from Igarashi himself. And we certainly can't expect it from Konami. What even was that gotcha-ass Apple Arcade game? That was clearly a free-to-play game at some point in development, right? It had to be. Chronicles gets so many things right that the things it misses can be brushed off as the quirks that come from indie development. Yeah, it could be a lot more polished and the controls could feel more fluid, but I think you'd actually lose a little of that old school feeling if they were. It's like the difference between a filmmaker who handmade some practical effects that aren't super convincing versus someone using very bland and also not very convincing CGI. There's enough heart that the jank starts to feel like part of its charm. Still, that could push some people away, so you'll be happy to know that the game has a demo you can try on Steam right now to see if it will vibe with you like it did for me. And if it doesn't, well, why did you watch this far? I'm legitimately curious. Thank you for watching another of my decreasingly visible videos. That makes you special. You, the chosen one. It's your destiny to wield that mighty like button and slammest thy palm upon it. I'll continue rotating reviews of indie games and animation for the foreseeable future, so be sure to check back next week for another video. Spoiler alert, it's probably gonna be an anime. An extra special thanks to my indie darlings, Rob Scott, Tyler McBride, Thumpus, Nick Shalark, Tony Domenico, and Game Trekker. If you'd like your name up here, or an audio shoutout, or maybe even a drawing of your OC in this credit screen, hop over to my Patreon via the link in the description and support the channel. That's all for now, so until next time, you'll find me in another castle.